Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you for inviting me here. I shall try to share with you some of my experiences as a policymaker, and I will try to put it in 15 minutes. Please give me a signal. And the subject of my introduction is, in fact, are my experiences with monitoring and evaluation as policy tools. When I started working at the ministry, I first started working with issues like general practitioners, mental health care, hospital care, etc. And later on, more or less by coincidence, I was nominated the head of the drug policy division, and that was in the 90s. I realized after a short time that this is a very fascinating working field, the drug issue. It's completely different from other health fields because the drug problems are constantly changing. Also the nature of drugs involved are changing. There are many sectors involved. It's not only health, but it's all the educational system, it's justice, it's customs, it's politics. It's highly a politicized issue. Many disciplines are needed for the disciplines. And last but not least, it was a very fast-moving working field. There's an ongoing development of new methods, good practices, etc. And I realized after some time, I said, well, what am I doing here as a policy maker? And the main challenge is in working, in fact, with three main sectors, elements, who are dependent on each other. On the other hand, they all have their own role to play. It's, first of all, it's politics, especially drugs is a highly politicized issue. Every politician has an idea or a judgment. He pretends to know everything about drugs. There are scientists involved who also have their own role to play. And last but not least is this fast working field of health practitioners, policemen, etc., etc. And the challenge is in identifying these three actors and try to let them communicate with each other. That's the main challenge of the policy maker. The main obstacles are that the collaboration between these sectors is often very problematic. To start with, it's always the differences between health and justice, but it's also the lack of communication between scientists, practitioners, etc. Politicians, I said it before, they have the tendency to say ad hoc what they think and what they want. They have little knowledge of the situation. You can't blame them because it's a very complicated working field. They tend to think top down and they're very often very emotional in their ideas. And science, I'm putting it just in a few wordings here, so don't blame me, but there's always the problem of money, and consequently there's always the problem of long-term programming of research project, and I must say they often, it's improving now, but and especially in the 90s, they had a tendency to speak from the ivory tower, to use very difficult language to try to explain very simple things. And practice, that's always, again, I said they have to do the work, but they have always lack of time and money and budget. They had no quality standards at that time. And they failed to give the right signals to politicians and scientists so that those people cannot reflect to their day-to-day problems. And if these three elements are not connected very well together, the danger is that drugs policies can become inefficient, inconsistent, and incredible to the population, and this can lead to a widening gap that we've seen that especially in the 90s, a widening gap between the citizen and the policymakers. And last but not least, the biggest danger is, and it has always been, in mixing up personal opinions and scientific facts. So a good policymaker, especially in the 90s, should start working in a policy cycle. We started in the Netherlands in the 90s with that. A cycle is a period of 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time. That could be different from country to country. But it always starts with implementing the policy, then monitoring, what are the results, then evaluation, how could we interpret it, these facts. This is the input for innovation and research, and that could lead to a new policy cycle. And the policy tools, it's quite obvious, are of course developing of policy strategies, action plans, developing good establishment, good coordination mechanisms, and monitoring and evaluation systems. And I said that before, monitoring and evaluation system are the input for research and innovation structures. And these are indispensable tools for a policymaker. Without that, he or she cannot develop a good drug policy. And this brings me to the role of the policymaker. I've stressed that before. That's first of all to raise awareness amongst these players about the fact that they are dependent on each other on the one hand. On the other hand, they have to separate their responsibilities. So improving communication and cooperation is the first task of the policymaker, and to improve the transfer of knowledge. Another thing, and I would like to give an example in a few minutes, is to create intellectual leeway. A good policymaker needs to have the courage to invest in new experimental developments. And on the whole, I think the main task is to manage the policy cycle. And last but not least, especially speaking here, is to make the connection between what's happening at the international field and encouraging your national experts to go to international bodies in order to exchange knowledge. So this is my point, in fact, my first remark about the role of the policymaker. It's not primarily a political function or a scientific function. A good policymaker is a manager in the first place. Let me end. Monitoring and evaluation are indispensable tools in this whole process. Let me share with you, I can spend that because it's obvious, monitoring is the basis for evaluation, and evaluation is the input for further development. But let me, because of the time, skip that and give you some examples and some of my personal experiences. I think you all know that, especially in the 90s, the Netherlands was one of the few countries that has legalized, or not legalized, but tolerated the sale of cannabis in small amounts. And there was a lot of criticism on the Netherlands. Apart from the cannabis issue, we have invested as one of the first countries in what we call harm reduction measures. We have set up needle exchange programs, methadone programs as one of the first countries. And we were highly criticized by Germany, France, Sweden, United States. In fact, almost everybody was against us. And this man you see here, it's Mr. Chirac, the president of France. He was one of the most outspoken people who criticized the Netherlands. And our government was very unhappy with this criticism because the Netherlands is heavily dependent on international trade and international relationships. So our government really got nervous by this criticism. At one time, to give you an example of the tone of this criticism, France was undertaking nuclear tests in the Pacific. They were testing an atomic bomb in the Pacific, which caused a lot of damage to the environment. And when he was criticized on this damage, he said, well, this atomic damage is nothing compared with the effects of a Dutch drug policy. I mean, that was the tone. It's no joke, it happened. So every time there was criticism, I was called by my minister, said, oh, we are so nervous, what should we do? Shall we give up our drug policy? Meaning, what is it worth? In fact, that was the question. And also in '96, because it went on for years, there was another attack by the French Senate on the Netherlands, claiming that the Netherlands was a narco state. I mean, comparable with Colombia and other countries. It was a neighboring country accusing us of that. And that was the point when my minister and the prime minister were at the brink of giving up our policy. But I was able to present a report produced by the University of Amsterdam. It says cannabis policy in Germany, France, and the Netherlands. And this was a report produced by the University of Amsterdam in close collaboration with his French colleagues, some colleagues from Germany, colleagues from the United States. And this report, and we even sent a Dutch researcher to France to investigate the situation in France, describing the French situation, translated in Dutch and published it in this report. And everybody was very upset about this report because it made clear that the situation, especially in France and also in Germany as regards harm reduction, was much worse than the situation in the Netherlands. And we also sent it immediately to the press, of course, and Parliament, so everybody was involved. And this was really a turning point in the debate and also a turning point in the relationships with France. Because whether they liked it or not, these were good figures. And it was so good that the French offered money to translate this Dutch report in French again, because they didn't have a report in French about their own situation. And like I said, it completely changed the tone of the debate. And we succeeded in fact, defending our policy in this way, thanks to the presentation of data and first effort to compare these data with other countries. Another output of this crisis was the establishment of the National Drug Monitor, because our politicians got courage again to say, well, what are the French to accusing us of this devastating policy? Well, isn't that bad at all? They were so fed up that especially my minister gave me the money to establish a National Drug Monitor, which is a very comprehensive system in which all the available data in the Netherlands are collected into this National Drug Monitor. They publish a report every year. And the whole idea is to combine all the available data, including alcohol, tobacco, including justice figures, everything we know about the drug situation, or let's say abuse, substance abuse situation, are collected in this report. And from the 90s on till it's still published every year, we can give input to the EMCDDA. We published a report to Parliament. And in fact, it's the basis for an ongoing debate in the Netherlands about drug policy. You see here some examples of all the subjects that are taken on board in this monitor. You see everything we know. It's methadone registration, it's addict care registration, school surveys, mental health care, infectious diseases, the pill market. I will spend a few words on that too. So the lesson here is that, in fact, thanks to Mr. Chirac, we have now an excellent monitoring system in the Netherlands. And thanks to this monitoring system and collection of data, we have succeeded in maintaining the main lines of our policy. And the second remark, if I have still time, Mr. Chairman, that's more or less in line with the previous example, is that my recommendation to you is to invest in international cooperation, especially amongst scientists, because we could produce this report I've just mentioned because we had the knowledge, we had the experience, we had the networking, because we have funded researchers in Amsterdam and Rotterdam to do ongoing work on drug research. So it's not an ad hoc situation, but you have to allow them to build up experience, etc. And these researchers have delivered input to the Pompidou Group, together with some other researchers, I think it were some people from the UK, in developing the core indicators, the drug indicators, like drug use, problematic use, demand, treatment demand, mortality. These indicators were developed by the Pompidou Group with a substantial input of Dutch researchers. Once developed, the EMCDDA took over these indicators. In fact, the work they're doing now, it's excellent work, by the way, is based upon the indicators developed by the Pompidou Group. And the Pompidou Group could do this because there was input from national researchers in this process. It didn't fall out of heaven, it was just a matter of investment. And the EMCDDA is delivering excellent report, I mentioned that, which are on its turn the input for the EU policies, strategies, action plan, and the national authorities are looking at these EU reports to develop their national policies. So this is how it works, and my main recommendation here is invest, let your researchers go to international body, encourage them to cooperate because it pays off. This is an example. I mentioned that the criticism on the Netherlands, because it went on for years and years, and once the EMCDDA had produced their first reports, we could show by these figures, for instance, this is about problematic hard drug users, that the Netherlands isn't doing so bad at all. I don't know whether you can see it, but it has a very low rate of problematic hard drug users compared with, for instance, Germany, France, also Sweden, who was criticizing us. And this is thanks to the input of the EMCDDA. It really had changed the debate. This is on cannabis use. The main criticism on the Netherlands was on the fact that we allowed cannabis sale. But if you look at the figures, you say we are not doing so bad at all, especially not compared with France and especially not compared with the United States, with their war on drugs going on. Third remark is that you have to be ready to stimulate innovation. You must take chances as a policymaker. You need to have the courage to do things of which you think, well, I don't know whether it will work, but give it a chance. And the drug information and monitoring system is an excellent example of this. It is a system which offers consumers, of party drugs the possibility to have their drugs who are bought illegally tested at a location. First it was at the rave parties, but later on you could have it tested at 25 places in the Netherlands. I'm mentioning this system because it was also highly controversial. There was a lot of criticism on it. People criticized, said, well, you are encouraging people to buy drugs. I mean, this is bad for health, it's a wrong signal, etc. But thanks to this system, we have an excellent monitoring of the market. We have an excellent acute risk assessment system. We know immediately whether dangerous pills are on the market or not. And this is again the basis for preventive actions, meaning this is how it works, but I don't have the time to elaborate it. So this is an example of the figures we have more about more than 2,000 pills are tested each year. We know exactly the content, the quality, the price, everything. So it's an excellent monitoring mechanism. And this is just an example of all the warning campaigns we were able to start because we knew what's going on at the market. And this goes on, even these days it goes on. And it's very helpful. So the message here is dare to invest in innovations. The last example was on the debate on harm reduction, but I don't have the time here. But in fact, it's the same story. There was a lot of criticism on harm reduction, but thanks to the presentation of comparative data, almost all countries in the EU have taken over harm reduction policies. So I will finally try to summarize my experiences with monitoring and evaluation. It must be structural activities. It takes time and it takes money. You have to know that as a policymaker, but it pays off. You need political support, because sometimes it can be controversial. You need political courage, because as a politician you need to have the courage to invest in a system that can criticize your own policy. And the support of the research community is essential, because all researchers always want to protect their own data. And you have to, that is the main message, to separate the process of monitoring and evaluation from the political process. The products must be understandable. That's another issue. Don't have the time, but don't overwhelm everybody with reports. Be very precise and be short and be understandable. And the same goes for the input. It's not a challenge of collecting as many data as possible, but to limit the number of data. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope I have shared with you some experiences. Coordination, monitoring, and evaluation are indispensable drug tools. It takes time, money, and political will. I have seen a fundamental change in the tone and the nature of the drug policy debate in the last 20 years, thanks to the collection and the presentation of reliable data. And finally, it's my last slide, Mr. Chairman, some suggestion for policymakers: be reliable, be realistic. Well, that's what they always have to be, I guess, but especially here in this field, because everybody knows about these data. They're on internet, so don't tell nonsense, rely on data. Invest, stimulate innovation, respect the separation of your own political will from facts, and last but not least, stimulate international cooperation between researchers. Thank you.